I'm Timothy White, back in the studio with Keith Richards, and we're discussing his successful new solo career and the Talk Is Cheap album he's just put out. And Keith, I want to ask you about your current radio favorite, which is the song You Don't Move Me, and I got a few sample lyrics here. You made the wrong motion, drank the wrong potion. It's no longer funny, it's bigger than money. I wanted to discuss the origins of that song, and I think they came about because you were asking your co-producer, Steve Jordan, for some suggestions.
Yeah, true. I've written about 30-odd songs, 30 to 40 songs, and I just looked to see, and I said, I can't find anything to continue. I can't find something to hook onto it, to sort of write about, subject matter or whatever. And Steve looked at me with this big, when in doubt, write about Mick, because he knows that I'll make juices flow in me, which really means it's not actually about Mick, but it's a kick-off point. It's about anybody in that position, and you have a friend and you feel you can't get through, and, and you're trying to sort of let them know. It's no longer funny. It's bigger than money. You just don't move me anymore.
That was You Don't Move Me from Talk Is Cheap, and this is the Keith Richards edition of Timothy White's Rock Stars. And Keith, since this show is about your entire career and your life to boot, let's go back early 60s when you were the lead guitarist for the top club band in London. If you had called the Rolling Stones a rock and roll band, they would have been a little bit offended because you guys were working in the rhythm and blues idiom, and that was the ticket that you wanted to ride with at that point in time.
That's true, and at the time that the Stones started off in England, rock and roll had sort of degenerated, and it kind of meant Fabian, Frankie Avalon. By 59, what did you have? Elvis was in the army. Buddy had taken the dive. Jerry Lee Lewis was disgraced. Little Richard had gone back to the church. Hence, we stressed the rhythm and blues end of it and went in through the jazz club entrance of playing, which is a lot smaller, but at least you have more choices of what you want to do.
Now, those early jazz clubs like the Roundhouse and the Rhythm and Blues Club in Ealing, and was the Marquee Club, the original one on Oxford Street?
Yeah, and the Crawdaddy, Richmond, all those.
The Crawdaddy Club, you guys used to play on Sunday nights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what would a Sunday night at the Crawdaddy Club be like? Say at the point when they moved from the Station Hotel to like the Richmond Athletic Club, I think.
God, you know a lot about West London, man. It started off as a fairly small thing. We just took it over because we managed to convince the guy that owned the pub that we could bring in more people, and hence he would sell more drinks than the local Dixieland band that he had playing there.
Right.
So he tried us out for a bit, and within 2 or 3 weeks, slowly you'd drive up for the gig and there'd be a huge line going across the railroad tracks until it became like a real event.
And that was, say, 63.
Yeah.
So in the early days with the Stones, like an average set, you might play Route 66, you might play Bo Diddley's, do the Crawdad.
Yeah, a lot of Jimmy Reed stuff, a lot of Muddy Waters stuff, some Howlin' Wolf. We were kids, 18, 19, and we were like missionaries. We weren't out to sort of promote the Rolling Stones. We were out to promote this music that never got heard very much.
The name of the Rolling Stones, for people who don't know, it came from the old Muddy Waters 1950-51 hit Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone came from an old song called Catfish Blues by Tommy McLennan and Robert Petway.
Yeah, and I wonder where they got it from.
I know. I'm sure it was handed on somewhere down in the Delta.
Yeah. Somewhere there's only really one song in the whole world, and probably Adam and Eve hummed it to each other. And everything else is a variation on it in one form or another,
Well, you had some blues-oriented dreams come true back then because you guys got the chance to record at Chicago's Chess Studios.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. It's a little fortunate. In fact, Muddy Waters was actually painting the studio. There's this guy on top of a ladder, right, in a white suit. Anybody that wasn't selling records would have to make themselves useful. So, meet Muddy Waters. He's standing on a step ladder painting the ceiling.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And we're all toppling over, What is it, a hobby?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and we were recording in the same studio. And you start to realize how tough that business can be. That was, that's education time. Here's one of your gods painting the ceiling, and you're making a record and making a record of some of his songs. Hey, babe,
What's in your eyes are sort of flashing like airplane lights. You fill my cup, babe, that's for sure. Must come back for a little more.
That was a bluesy slide guitar of Keith Richards, 1969, You Got the Silver from the Let It Bleed album. I'm Timothy White here in the studio with Keith, and that song raises a point. I'm wondering if the Stones had any problems touring the Deep South in, say, the mid-'60s, playing black-oriented music.
Not from black people. Mainly, I think the first tour or two we did of the South, they were more hung up about our gender than they were about whether we were playing black music or not. We offended white Southerners in those days because of the hair. You know, I mean, once we were arrested for topless bathing.
Where?
Outside of Savannah, Georgia. I mean, yeah. Some people are driven by and swore that there were a load of chicks sleeping in and out of the pool with just a pair of drawers on. Yeah, and the cops drove up, you know, like, zooming up to bust these chicks, you know, and of course the closer they got, the more stupid they must have, you know, what do you mean?
That was Keith Richards singing Before They Make Me Run from the 1978 Rolling Stones album Some Girls. And we'll have more conversation about Keith's life and some rare music too when Timothy White's Rockstars continues. This is the Keith Richards edition of Timothy White's Rockstars, and I've been talking to Keith about his solo performances with the Rolling Stones over the years. I wonder though, if you had any vocal insecurities when you sat down finally to do your own solo record.
I personally didn't have any doubts about doing the vocals when I went into this record. I figured that, well, if I got to sing all of these songs, which I intend to do, the more I practice and go through, the better I would get at it. You know, practice maybe doesn't make perfect, but it makes for better. You know, right. So I get a lot of push from the guys I was working with. You know, nobody was there saying, "Oh God, this guy's paying us. We've got to say yes, Keith, yes, Keith." To me, that's important.
Is there a favorite vocal on Talk Is Cheap?
I keep coming back to No Mistake because I realized that I was really starting to feel comfortable with singing on this record. To take it down an octave and like sing it, make no mistake, and use like more of your voice rather than just sort of always trying to pitch it to the very outer limits at the top.
That was Make No Mistake from Keith Richards' Talk Is Cheap album, and it was a previously unavailable mix that Keith brought to us today. When we return on Timothy White's Rockstars, we'll hear more of Keith and his music. So don't go anywhere. Are you coming up with some new edges and angles?
In a way, right now, I'm pretty happy with the way I'm playing. I'm coming up with some variations, and I've expanded a little bit on things that I do. And all of that's to do with just working in the last 2 years constantly, from Aretha through Chuck Berry movie and once that finished, we go straight into this album, you know, at least working on it and playing. With the Stones got so big after Satisfaction that you would work either frantically for months and then maybe 18 months sometimes with absolutely nothing. You wouldn't even see the guys, you know. I mean, the bigger you get, the less you can work, yeah. You know, and which is not a good thing for a musician. So I've been playing constantly, and I've noticed that, yeah, it sure helps me. I mean, I play guitar at home, but it's not the same thing as playing with a band, you know. The only other thing I have to say about guitar is that no guitar player can go wrong if they play acoustic guitar, if they keep their hand in on the acoustic guitar, then anything else they do can only improve, can only benefit from that. Whereas if you don't, you can kind of get very much into using the electricity and use the tricks, the sustain and feedback, and you can lose a lot of touch and lose a lot of ideas about playing guitar if you don't keep up playing the acoustic guitar. That is the instrument, because it can't fool you. You can't make tricks with the acoustic. If you keep the acoustic guitar, it'll help your electric guitar playing, but your electric guitar will never help your acoustic playing. It's a different touch, a different feel. And you can get into that fastest guitar player in the West syndrome, which is, for rock and roll music, absolutely, a dead-end street. That's rock music. That ain't rock and roll.
Keith, I want to thank you so much
thank you,
for getting together this special Keith Richards edition of Timothy White's Rockstars. A wonderful thrill. And I'd like to close the show with a track on Talk Is Cheap that would teach any rocker as much about the art of swinging a groove as anything recorded in recent memory. The song is called Rock a While, and it's both a history lesson and a breath of fresh air from the hardest working guitarist in show business.
Thank you, too.
Keith Richards.
No strings attached, they let them all. Yeah, took me a rock a while just to come on, baby, stay with me. Stay with me.
Keith Richards, My Rock and Roll Life on Timothy White's Rockstars has been brought to you by the United States Marine Corps, the few, the proud, the Marines. This program was produced exclusively for Westwood One by Andy Denmark and Timothy White. Executive producer Norm Pattis. For their help, thanks go to David Knight, Jerry Sherrill, Brian Griffith, Bob Merlis, Jim Brem, and Bill German at Beggar's Banquet, Post Office Box 6152, New York, New York, 10128. Special thanks go to Jane Rose, Linda Simmons, and everyone at Raindrop Services. And of course, thanks to Keith Richards, both for his candid conversation and for his continuing dedication to filling his life and ours with great rock and roll. Timothy White's Rockstars is based on the book Rockstars by Timothy White, published by Crown Outlet Books. I'm Roger Steffens. Thanks for being with us, and keep listening for the next edition of Timothy White's Rockstars from the Westwood One Radio Network.